Here you can see the unmodified Alias spur gear. Now what's important to note is the length of the tube on that compared to the length of the tube on the modified version. You see there's a lot less. Now why that becomes important will be clear when you take a look at how the Alias propellers mate up to the shaft and how they mount. So you put the very short Alias prop shaft back in, and then get it to mount up, pop it all the way down, and you'll see that the spur gear with the shaft flush with the bottom, the spur gear will be floating and engaging the very, very top edge of the pinion gear, which is not an ideal configuration. If you let it hang, you have about that much free space to get it to sit at the bottom like the stock Ominus configuration and mate with the bottom part of the gear. So this obviously doesn't work. You need to cut the center shaft and trim it down so it'll mate. One of the easiest ways I have found to do that cut is to get a set of flat washers from a hardware store. These are 5mm zinc plated, and you just take two of those. You take your unmodified gear, you place two of them on top, and that is approximately the correct height to cut to get down to what you need to have it sit at the bottom and to have the top of the propeller be able to actually come down on the aluminum center tube and mate with it. Otherwise it won't be able to engage the screw threads. So what I used for that is a file. You can use any file you have access to, it doesn't really matter. This is just what I had on hand, and it happens to work fairly well. So flat tabletop file, cut it, grind it down, get it flat as you possibly can, and you should end up with something like that. Now, this isn't perfect, however, so if we mate this back up and get that installed, you can see that it's sitting at the bottom like it should, and there's no slop there. However, when we put the propeller back on, let me just find that spot, you may notice that there is a slight gap. Now that's well and good for the most part, but if there's ever any impact while you're flying, or even if you sometimes pull a strong maneuver with a strong change of direction or drop in altitude, that will cause it to pop down like that. And then you basically just have to put your hand on the bottom and click the gear back into place. And I got tired of doing that after a while, and I think it was wearing my spur gears faster because it was, you know, engaging up and down and moving, which I didn't really like. It was sloppy. So to solve that problem, I simply got a box of number 60 O-rings with 1/4 inch outer diameter, 1/8 inch inner diameter, and a 1/16 inch height, and that's basically perfect. So that is one of these. That is one of these guys right here. So to solve that problem of having the extra slop in the propeller shafts, after you cut your spur gear to height, I simply put one there between the spur gear and the base of the propeller, and pop your propeller on, and that O-ring takes up all the slack between them and also acts as a buffer, a little shock buffer. If it does have a little bit of extra slack, it should keep it from moving and causing too much of a problem. And it's basically the perfect height to have full thread engagement, so your propeller won't be wobbly or not fully engaged. And that is a very simple overview of the parts and pieces I used to convert my Ominus from the default shafts and gears and propellers to the much better Alias gears and propellers. Now again, here are the parts you are going to need. You will need these things here. You use your same Ominus spur gears. I tried using the Alias spur gears, but they are a slightly different outer diameter and they cause way too much friction on the pinion, and I think it would lead to burning your motors out way too early. So stock gear, you put the 2 flat washers on them, the 2 5mm flat washers, file it down, cut it to height, smooth it, make sure it's even. If it's tilted too much to one side or the other, you're going to put a little bit of torque on the propeller, which can cause that shaft to spin slightly slowly or out of balance, which is not what you want. And you're going to need your O-rings to take up that little bit of slop space that'll end up between the top of your spur gear and your propeller. And that's it. It is a fairly easy conversion. Took me about, after I had the parts, probably 5-10 minutes to do the conversion, and I'm much more satisfied with the increased durability of my Ominus. And I do believe these blades are a little bit smoother, and they seem to give it slightly better flight characteristics. It might be placebo. I didn't test it beforehand, but just in terms of my impression, it appears to fly much better with those propellers and shafts.